Right.
It's like, what's my line?
Oh, hard to see out there. Good morning. Yes, my name is Erik Anderson. As Stephen said, I am co-founder and co-director of the Integrated Innovation Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, which cross-trains master's students in design, business, and engineering. My pleasure today to moderate this panel. That should be a great conversation between some really well-known, established industry experts. I want to start off by first thanking Ford for sponsoring this panel session, which is part of their Designing Innovation series. And I also want to personally thank Kevin for dropping off my new Ford Edge earlier this week. You didn't have to park it in an exhibit gallery. The parking lot would have been just fine.
I hope you like the color.
Beautiful. Only thing is, having a hard time finding the keys, but we can talk later. I also want to thank our friends at Core 77 for live streaming this event, and so that we can have a reach around the world for this event. So that's been great. And in your materials and also online is a little bit more of a bio for our panelists. I want to give you kind of a brief overview, though, before we get started. Kevin George is the Ford Exterior Design Manager who has been designing experiences his entire life, starting a career in amusement parks and other commercial spaces that required imaginative landscapes, to toy design, to creating vehicles for classic action figures, and since 2001 has been designing for Ford and certainly part of the team that brought the Ford Edge. Kevin George is to my far left. Next is Ed Boyd, who is Dell's Vice President of Experience Design across commercial, consumer, and enterprise. His strategic vision is helping Dell define and execute specific branding and personalization on a wide array of products and experiences. And he's previously been a global director for Nike and also for Sony, and has also had his own consulting office for some years prior to that. And then, of course, to my immediate left is Charles Austen Angell, who is the founder of Modern Edge, a strategic and industrial design firm for original work in the fields of health and wellness, mobility, home products, and experience environments. He maintains a focus on the role of culture, politics, and geography in shaping human needs. And he's also, as I think we all should know by now, the chairman of IDSA. So thank you all for being part of the panel. Just a little bit of a format. We're going to try to have a conversation up here. I have a couple of questions I want to propose. I'll toss out, have each panel, let's respond, get a little dialogue going. We will have time at the end of the session for a couple of questions from the audience here in Austin, but also from those participating on Core 77. So the Core 77 representative who will be asking the questions on behalf of the online community will direct you to the mic at that time. So we have a lot to talk about in a short period of time, so I won't delay it any further. I thank my friend Stephen Umbach for this wonderful prompt. So this is something that if I hold it up, it's kind of a warning that, hey guys, you need to cut it. And I don't want to have to do this.
Can I switch places?
So this is what this is about. So let's get started. So clearly organizations today are trying to find, in the competitive marketplace, are trying to find ways of increasingly connecting with customers. And this is even more challenging as customers are even more connected with the organization, but also with themselves. And so customer-driven innovation is something that many people are trying to strive towards. These folks up here have been doing it for years, have their own unique perspective on how it's done within their organizations. And what we hope to learn is how they go about doing that. What are some of the challenges, but also the opportunities and insights that happen through their process and that happens uniquely within their organization. So the first question is, can you share how your organization approaches customer-driven innovation? And I'm going to start with Kevin.
Well, like many of you, we try and understand our customer, what their needs are and where they're headed. The edge that's in the next room is an evolution of a product that's successful in the marketplace. So that's kind of nice for us because there's a built-in customer that we're familiar with, but we also are aware, like you and your businesses, that our customer evolves. And the difficult thing for us is that we have this development process that takes quite a while, 3-4 years, and really when we start thinking about the next car, it may be 5 years before that car hits. And we're trying to predict the future, the near future, but it's a prediction. And we try and mitigate that risk as much as we can by knowing everything we can about the customer. And we do the same process that an industrial design team might do. We really immerse ourselves in what are the problems and try and develop some insights into the customer and where they're headed, and that's what happened with Edge. The Edge customer we knew was moving to a lifestyle that was a little bit more fast-paced, and that has a lot to do with social networking and how that's changed how we think about our social structure. And they wanted a vehicle that was a little bit more fast-paced. We know that the number one reason customers buy the Edge is exterior design, which is great. The number 2 reason is interior design. But the number 3 reason is technology. So we know they're going to want to pack a lot of tech into their vehicle. So understanding the role that technology plays in their lives and understanding that their life is becoming more fast-paced, the car has to reflect that image to them somehow. When they first see the car, they have to say, yeah, I get it, it's the Edge, but now it looks a little more nimble. It looks like it fits my lifestyle. And the technology that it has in it, makes me a better driver and a better person, a better mom, dad, coach, boss. So that's kind of how we look at it. How does the customer evolve and how does the product evolve ahead of time to meet where that customer is going to end up?
And so can you talk a little bit about the kind of structure, as much as you can, maybe kind of a high level, because I imagine this really complex machine that it's a human quality or a human machine within Ford, all these moving parts, working on many facets of interior, exterior experience. And so how do you actually get at,
we try to come together as a team. There's a product team, even for something as complex as a car. It starts off in an advanced state with a product team that's smaller and more manageable. And we try and meet face to face and discuss, what's our customer brief? What's our customer target? How does that evolve into a design brief that has those learnings in it about where the customer's headed? And then, a lot of discussion happens. One of the interesting things, we go out and we talk to Edge customers in a clinic situation, so we're not actually talking to them. We hear them and their words, they say things that describe the car, and one of them might say, well, I like it because it's dominating on the road. When I see an Edge in my rearview mirror, it's got this dominating kind of presence. And somebody else will say, well, I think it's very accommodating. I bought it because it's accommodating. And we said, if those are the two characteristics, they're kind of in opposition. How can you be dominant and accommodating at the same time? And it was in this one particular discussion where we hit upon those two phrases and said, we can't toss either one of them. Why don't we blend them? And not blend in a sense that each one is compromised, like it's just a sofa bed, but blend them together in the sense that if you find a person, right, who knows when to be dominating and knows when to be accommodating, when to be a leader and when to be supportive, we describe that person as charismatic. And let's make the Edge charismatic. Let's give it that quality, that human quality that people can relate to, that can encompass everything people love about it today. So that kind of became our core idea, that Edge was going to be a great combination of dominating and accommodating. And that happened just listening to the customer and discussing amongst ourselves as designers how we interpreted what they were saying.
Great. So Ed, I'm going to ask you the same question, and certainly, Dell has a history of kind of dialing into customer needs, right, and giving customer preference. And so how does it look at, from your perspective, how do you guys connect with the customer now, and how's it driving innovation?
In some ways very similar. I was always, from the time I was a student, impressed with the auto industry, looking at advanced concept cars and thinking about the future. And we do a very similar approach at Dell. We look at long range vision of what we think a day in the is that all? Sorry. And we look at 3 generations out typically. So we start thinking about different customer segments, what they're dealing with today, the problems, the issues, very similar. and we look about three generations out and start thinking about where will technology be, how can we solve these problems, how can we make life easier, more efficient. You know, with the life cycles in the IT industry, instead of being 4 or 5 years, you know, sometimes it's 2-year cycles, so maybe you're looking at anywhere from 6 to 10 years out, and then we develop an advanced solution. But one of the things we do that's kind of unique is we do it agnostically of Dell. We say, what will it be like regardless of whether we choose to participate in providing that solution or not. And then we sit back with the strategic planning teams, our CTO organization, you know, design is involved, and we think about if this is something we'd like to participate in, how would we do that? You know, do we need to partner with companies? Do we need to buy certain assets, build things? And then we started developing kind of a strategy and a plan to do that. So, for example, if I take us, creative professionals, and if you look at the precision workstations that are next door, we're thinking about long-term, how does that evolve? And so the long-range vision work is more around precision as a service versus a computer with a lot of horsepower. It solves a lot of problems like centralizing your data in one location, getting rid of duplicate files, collaboration becomes easier. And so if you look at what Dell's been doing in the interim, as we move toward that place, we've been buying virtualization companies, and making key investments in the infrastructure and the technology to do that, and collaborating with companies like Intel and others as we drive toward that vision of a simpler, more efficient way of providing that service. So that's kind of how we do it. Yeah.
Great. And then Austen, you have your own consultancy now for a number of years, but you've been across many different industries and you're working globally, and so your response to having all those experiences and how customer-driven innovation is played into what you do and what your team does.
It's interesting. This whole space is kind of the architecture of translation, right? Taking the future, which is abstract, trying to translate it into a current vision, which is concrete, so that we can make plans which are abstract and then act on them to create something concrete again. There's a saying that in theory, practice and theory are the same, but in practice, they're not, right?
Yogi Berra, I think.
Right. And so, what we recognize is that you need the rigor of academia from an anthropological perspective, from an ethnography, which we do a lot of. You need the rigor to have the proper amount of skepticism about your own assumptions. So we employ a lot of ethnography teams. We, in the past couple of years, have deployed as many as 5 teams in 5 cities at the same time, doing individual studies in households and so forth. But we also recognize there is this part of the investigation that has to take some chances, and that's where designers have this intuition that they can actually put into what we would call the design of experiments, right? We can introduce things into this design research and say, well, what happens without this? Or, co-creative work sessions and so forth. And it's marrying those two that we think is what produces some pretty tangible results with the right amount of credibility or evidence-based outcomes that people can act on it and commit capital to, maybe further reaching programs. And of course, that's the generative portion of research. And then there's the evaluative portion of research, right? You go out there, you do this, come back, you create your theory, you create your concepts, and then you go out there, make something, and then very quickly you want to rapidly iterate the evaluative portion. So it's kind of a combination of disciplines and approaches.
What are the, clearly we see some of the opportunities, or many of the opportunities of customer-driven innovation. What are some of the challenges that you find you have to overcome, and certainly big organizations and now working with other organizations, And let me start with Kevin. I'm sorry. Let me start in the middle and work my way around so I can restart. Let me start with Ed. So what are some of the challenges to customer-driven innovation?
An example of long-range ideas, a lot of times when the vision work is done, it's very disruptive to the current business, right? So for a large corporation, if you're talking about blowing things up and doing things completely differently, it's pretty challenging. And I can reflect back, my Sony days, for example, when I was at Sony, when we were, in denial of, a lot of the entertainment revolution that was approaching and how we were holding on to, legacy businesses. I think today you have to be willing to really blow that up and think, in a much more open, objective way and approach it. And so it is definitely a skill in corporate America to with the senior management executives to sit back and listen to those strategies, but it's becoming more and more acceptable, and so it's making my life a little easier, but it's still very difficult. Every new idea that's very disruptive and different starts with a lot of antibodies before it is adopted, and live that every day. Yeah,
it's difficult
Yeah.
to explain that intuition to people who haven't been involved in the process or come from a completely different background, division of the company. Their head's in a different space, and they're frankly trying to manage risk. And we come along being disruptive, as Ed's saying, and one of the ways that we've kind of tried to circumvent that tension is instead of asking people just to have this faith in us, just take this leap and trust my intuition, because they hear the word intuition and that gets them even more nervous. And I think intuition is really just our memory of the mistakes we've made, right, as designers, and the things that worked, and you started building that library up when you were, maybe not even in grade school yet, because you've been creating your whole life, and they weren't there with you for that journey. So, there's a credibility issue, there's a trust issue. You say things like faith and intuition. We try and craft a story. That's maybe from my background, coming from toys and entertainment and being very interested in story and always liked movies. And if I can walk in and have a presentation that's not the typical PowerPoint, but that tells a story, and I say, spend a few minutes with me and we're going to talk about where we started. And it's not something we made up. It's, hey, we were talking to these customers and they said these things, and we started connecting the dots. It's like any other design process. You pour in all this research, and something about designers, it spits out, a story. And we kind of take them through the tent poles of the story and say, it started with this, and that jives with what we learned in research because we tested it, and then we added this, which is where the product already was naturally heading, and oh, by the way, this new technology we're thinking about incorporating, that supports the story. And everybody likes a good story, so it helps them to understand that, this is the way we think. It's not an Excel chart. It's not some sort of business case. It's a story that we put together using our intuition that, they can easily understand in the way that, they need to. Like, they're great at what they do, and we're great at what we do. So spend a few minutes in our world, or an hour or so, and we'll take you through the story, and then we'll all be on the same page.
Yeah. Also, I found collaborating with strategic planning and advanced marketing and other teams. Right. So when we go in and tell a story, it's not just a design story only. It has elements of where the market is moving, the long-range forecasting, and those types of things help aid in the storytelling. When you're building up that lateral support. Yeah.
It's really interesting you bring up the intuition and faith and all that, and there's a legacy in design. I truly believe this, that we're entering this kind of magic next golden age of design, but it's different than other ones in the past. In the past, it's been the golden age of design where people could just draw from their intuition, and that's where the value was, that it's just magic. We've got we got a little bag of concepts in here. We're just going to dole them out, and they're all magic. Right. But now the magic is this process for collaborating, and it's much more transparent. And so words like faith and intuition are challenging. But every single other discipline, whether it's research or engineering, they have words like hypothesis,
Right.
So we often refer to concept sketches as hypotheses.
Yeah.
These are our theories,
Yeah.
and we can go test them. To what level you want to test them is the level of risk that your company is interested in taking.
Right.
And by phrasing it that way, all of a sudden, all of these other disciplines that maybe have traditionally been viewed as having more rigor, we're getting away from the consultant speak and into like reality.
Yeah.
It's like,
More-
wow, welcome.
Yeah, no, it's very collaborative today.
Yeah.
And I think that's critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's some great perspectives of some of the challenges internally.
Yeah.
With the customer now being more connected to you, and in many ways by design, you invite them to offer opinions, offer comment, feedback on product. How do you manage the challenges or expectations of customers in response to what you're working on and what they think should be their voice in making change or creating new product?
Well, I think we're actually, your question teed very well into just what we're saying, is that it's all about getting away from the old world design, we're going to perform magic, stand back, ta-da, and into this new, very collaborative, open, transparent language, and saying, here are our shared objectives for the program, and here are our theories, and here's what we feel comfortable with as far as risk. We think we understand this area well and we can leverage the past, versus here are the spaces we'd like to investigate. You can't poll everybody who's going to buy it, so you have to figure out exactly what you're comfortable betting on, and make sure that that's explicit. I think that's that new collaboration.
For me, it's very easy to prototype and share future experiences with end users today in ways that 20 years ago it was impossible. So there was definitely a leap of faith to go deliver an experience. But today, it's very easy to do that. So a lot of our long-range stuff, we're iterating all the way through that cycle and sharing and testing with people and gathering real-time feedback. And so it's just, and that's very helpful. And so you see the ideas evolve and get better and better and better really, really fast. And so when you get to the end, you kind of know what the end user, the level of satisfaction with what you're sharing is.
But it seems
I
to be
envy you.
Yeah.
I mean, to
Cars
hear,
are
I
a
was
bit
going to ask
harder.
you about that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you can put together an experience
Really
and,
quick,
and to hear that it's really quick, just I'm envious. We can put together an experience, but it has to look and feel like a real car.
Yeah.
And that's not a quick process for us. So again, there's so many people involved, and the risk is so high. There's a whole factory of people. There's a ton of people standing outside the studio door waiting for you to do your job so they can do theirs. And the more that we can pull them in, as you say, and collaborate with them, the better off we are. But at the end of the day, we've got to create some properties that people can experience. And we take those out in a clinic situation and show them to them. Ahead of that, one of the things that's enabled us is the kind of animation that we can do on our desktops now that we used to do in an animation studio downstairs, send the data off.
Yeah.
So designers are getting more skilled at building their own 3D properties in digitally and then rendering them out in a realistic way, very easy on their desktop using our Dell computers, which we do. And I'm glad to say. And we take those to a clinic and we show them, put them up on the wall, and we get reaction to them like everybody here has experienced. But one of the things that we do, and I don't think we used to do it this way, certainly not in the early days of my career at Ford. Now, we kind of, after all the typical research is done, we've been doing a thing where we actually send the designers in to interact with the customers, not sit behind the one-way mirror, I don't know, it's a two-way mirror, and actually go in and say, hey, these are the designers, these are the guys that actually work on the car, and the car we've been talking about, and instead of just reacting to their sketches, why don't you help them create a sketch? And boy, does that change the nature of the conversation. They get up out of their chairs, they're enthused again, because it's tough when you're looking at, theme 1, Z, and 10, and you're trying to figure out what are the subtle differences, which one is not like the other, and, it's kind of, well, I kind of like this one for this reason. It's sort of a stilted sort of conversation. When they get up and they say, like, here's a blank page, what kind of car do you want? It's not that you're going to design the car in that session.
Right.
God forbid, that's not what it's about. It's about about changing the nature of the conversation and getting to know them and what excites them.
Yeah.
And you know, it seems simple, and maybe it's
Yeah.
very actually low tech, but
Yeah.
it helps work things out for us. And then the other thing we can do, there's some slides here of us developing concept car. So if we have a theory, and it's one that we believe in, it's not just a what if, it's something that we had some intuition about and we developed with the marketing team and all the pre-program work that we do, even, you know, with psychologists and sociologists help us. And we build a concept car that proves that out. What if the Edge looked like this? What if it was more athletic and more refined and a little bit more upscale? And that's some of the slides that you're seeing here in this presentation, that concept car that we showed in November at LA Auto Show last year. And people really responded to it. Everything that we thought about the exterior and interior, we got good feedback on. So we knew as we were finishing up the car, this is all pretty much validated. And I think you can see in the pictures, the concept to production, there's not a huge difference, which is nice too.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting when you talk about collaboration, part of that's understanding not just our own perspective, and designers we usually think, oh, we're really looking at everybody else's perspectives, but we do have our big blind spots. You know, when business thinks about consumer research, their emphasis is on reducing risk.
Yeah.
Now, that's why they want to do it.
Yeah.
They want to go, well, we don't want to flop.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to, we want to sell more, so we want to reduce our exposure and risk when we invest capital. That's the whole perspective. As a designer, we look at research as a way of being inspired. We'd like to do something even greater, maybe
Right.
you know, opportunity. And all of business is about either growing or
Yeah.
reducing cost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that
yeah.
these are the two kind of diametrically opposed ideas that we're constantly balancing. And whenever we can bring that language and that thinking into research,
Yeah, yeah.
it allows everybody to come in. And I think what you mentioned is the kind of extraordinary change to design, that the idea that you would let someone else draw on your drawing is an act of courage on the part of both individuals, but kind of unheard of.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
long ago? Not that long ago.
Well, it was always seen that if you break this plane and you interact with the customer, somehow you're tainting the research. So, you know, we do collect all that research, which is valid, and we shouldn't be there for that, influencing anything. But even on the last one, we didn't even go in with a blank page. We went in with maybe a rendering like you see here, and we used Photoshop, and we said, well, what's wrong with it? Well, somebody said, well, the grill's too big. Now the grill's smaller. I mean, it's beautiful, and they get it. You know, and the other thing I think, and I wonder how you guys feel about this, is it's amazing to me how astute these everyday customers are. We don't recruit necessarily people who are really design aficionados. We for some products, we recruit just the average type of consumer that might walk in a dealership. And they really say things that are just astonishing to me, like, well, the proportion of the sheet metal above the wheel makes the tire look too small. And you're like, how did you know that? You know, the culture really has valued design a lot more than when I first entered the industry, you know. And there's television shows about it and magazines that you can buy, and interior design, and it's a lot more valued.
Yeah.
The other thing that, again, we're kind of drawing the difference between research that evaluates and kind of moves the ball forward, research that originally generates and inspires the ideas. There's also the part of that original generational research that gives us better insights into the way that people consume those ideas. Mm-hmm. We did a project where we were trying to develop packaging that could be airdropped into a disaster zone where people might not only not read English, so they might be multilingual, but might not even have any graphic traditions whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so we had to figure out how people would interpret symbols and shapes and drawings and pictograms that they'd never seen before. And then we contrasted that with, you know, another program where we were working in 5 cities last year on a consumer project, and we found this kind of really interesting thing between people that you would say that are really all about brands, you know, that kind of profile that loves the brand. But there were 2 different types. There were the people that maybe decorated their entire kitchen with Coca-Cola things, but they didn't want anybody else in the neighborhood to imitate them. It was their brand. It was all about them.
Yeah.
They were like, this is what makes me special. I've got Coca-Cola all over the place. Versus the people that were evangelists. This is my brand, but I want everybody to imitate me. And that's like a profound difference. And it was like, for the for the company we were working with, it was a profound difference in the way they thought about brand pioneers and those type of consumers. So I think that kind of stuff is very fascinating for really eliciting those relationships and insights and the things that make our job as designers. It exposes a little bit of the magic, but the effect is still just brilliant.
Yeah.
So I want to give an opportunity now to, as we're starting to close down on our session, to see if you guys have questions or curiosities with each other, because you all represent very different industries, and give you guys an opportunity to ask something that you would like to know from one another.
Well, I think Ed already answered the question I was going to ask, because I wanted to know from him when he started talking about, we have to do 3 cycles out, and maybe that's 6 years. And I was like, with the pace of change in the tech industry, how you can possibly predict. But what I thought I heard was you're looking more at interaction and culture, and what people really want is simplicity, and how do you enable that?
Yeah, I mean, when we approach the multi-generational design process, you start with, today, you understand the problems and challenges that people are facing. And really, at a higher level, you try to understand what they're really trying to accomplish at a macro level. And then we can pretty accurately look at, where technology will be in 5 and 10 year range. So our CTO organizations, and our collaborations with other partners, we can paint that picture. Really where the creativity comes in is when you understand those ingredients, you start dreaming about different ways to use those ingredients and solve those problems. And you may fundamentally eliminate tasks that people are doing today, but you can easily find better ways. And so that's really fun for the folks in the tech world. And as a designer designing technology-based products today, it's changing at that rate, which sounds kind of like daunting and confusing, but it's actually amazing, because I was tired when I was younger of saying, well, one day we'll be able to do this. Now it's happening so fast, I'm like, we'll be able to do this, and we'll be able to do it in 6 years. And so...
But what you said about focusing on what they really want to do, that's key for me. Learning from you is, and I almost feel validated in the sense that we are thinking about it in the same way. We know the Edge customer, and hopefully all the Ford customers, really value the technology that we're putting into the product. That's what we've seen. But we have to do it in a way that's just supporting their primary job, right? Which is to drive this, several thousand-pound vehicle at maybe 70 miles an hour down the highway, and they have to do that safely. That's the main job. And all the other tech that we pack into the car has to support that in a way that doesn't diminish it or distract from it. And we're kind of breaking it down in the same way. What's their job? Their job is driver, and then maybe their job is mom or coach or boss. And so if the primary job is the focus, and then the boss says out loud, presses the sync button and says, read my latest emails, and the car just speaks them, and he doesn't have to take his eyes off the road or his hands off the wheel, that's making him a better boss while still protecting the main function. So bringing it back to what is the job, and not just let's pack some more tech in there for tech's sake, really resonates with me.
I was going to ask you about the future, go out a few generations. What do you think transportation will look like, feel like?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about autonomous vehicles, and I kind of was thinking someone might ask about that. So. We have a lot of features now that are kind of starting to bridge the space between you driving and the car driving. I don't know if you
braking systems today that are...
We have a collision avoidance system that we are in test mode right now with, and we actually had it as part of Edge concept. It's not on Edge production, but Edge production is going to have a warning. Collision warning system. So it's using the sensors that you already have on the front of your car and a camera, and it's looking down the road. And if it's seeing anything that might become an obstacle, it starts tracking it. And if it does see that there's a trajectory where it will be a collision, it starts warning you more obtrusively as it gets closer. The system that we had on the concept car will actually steer the car for you, brake, steer the car, put it back in the lane, and take the foot off the brake. I mean, it's amazing what that system that's in test development right now can do, but we have prototypes that do it. So, we have other things like, there's a lane keeping. I don't know if you've driven one of our vehicles with lane keeping, so it'll actually make it seem like you're going over rumble strips if you get out of your lane. It really feels that way just by shaking the steering wheel. Or we have adaptive cruise control that's sensing the other car in front of you and staying away from it for you. So we're getting there.
Cool.
You know, then on this topic, just make a quick comment, and then I'll let him ask a question for me.
Yeah.
In the area, we've done a lot of research in autonomous vehicles because we do, large combine design for some of the big ag companies. We've done big 48-meter yacht working with companies that produce those things, and the relationship is much more. It's very different than the intimate experience of driving your own vehicle. And one of the things that came out, and I'm not revealing anything from any particular company, is that we found when you take away the need for the driver to be the driver, it's not about what the people are going to do. Like, should they watch television or eat pizza or order ahead or whatever? It's really about what happens when the dynamic changes. What happens when the dynamic changes between the people in the car, and all of a sudden it goes from one person being in charge, a pilot that's in control, because the driver's always in control. Turn the stereo down, please be quiet, it's getting into traffic. They get to make calls.
Right.
But all of a sudden now you have an environment where the dynamics shifted, and people can choose to be completely democratic when they're inside the vehicle now. That difference in relationships, I think, is what's so fascinating about the opportunities that designers have to apply research. There's a lot more to it than that. We designed a wireless auto remote driving system for combines and so forth. So that's partially where that comes from.
Yeah, fascinating.
So thank you all. I'm going to open it up at this point in time to the audience to have a few questions. We have about 5 or 6 minutes left. So if there's any audience questions, right behind in the center aisle, right behind the camera, there's a mic. So please go up to the mic and we'll take a couple questions, and then we'll let you guys eat, I guess.
All right. Hey, I'm Grayson Bird. I'm a young professional designer, and I guess my question relates to a previous talk on the top 10 heuristics of designers, great designers in the past. And can you not hear me?
Yeah.
No?
That's better.
All right, yeah. My question is, maybe each of you could provide a specific example of how you've embraced failures, whether, through your professional or personal growth.
Well,
Is that?
I think that the beauty of this topic, that Erik has posed exactly the right questions, going from object to kind of the broader service. And it is about actually, it's not failures, it's about expecting to generate some wrong answers. We tell people in the beginning of the research, is like, prepare to find out where we're wrong.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, right? I mean, if you're in science, you have a theory, you have a hypothesis, you have a null hypothesis, and you go out and you try and find the exception to the rule that proves or disproves your theory. And then you have a statistical, level of confidence in that. And that's exactly what we're doing, is trying to be wrong. And then through that process, find out if we're right.
Yeah, I think in our world, something may go wrong, with a particular feature or concept, but hopefully that's not the only iron we have in the fire. And so for me, it's like, good, we're one step closer to getting on track with the right answer. Or from that failure, at least we've gained some learning. What's the insight that we gained from that, and how can we do it better next time? Along with, now we know, okay, they didn't like that one, but this one resonated with them. Now, if everything you didn't work out, that's tough too, but it sounds cliche, it's a process, and I'm sure that just something about the nature of being a designer, you tend to get up and dust yourself off and go back at it, because that's what you do, right? You don't give up. You have this vision, and you have to stay true to that vision, even if the execution of the vision may be inappropriate. But there's something core in that idea that you have to keep pushing forward.
Yeah. And you reset your expectations. Sometimes, I know when we failed, you step back and you go, why did this fail? Because I was so convinced that it was right. And then when you talk to customers and you figure out what went wrong, it helps, you step back and really start understanding the problem in a more complete way. And so I can think of a bunch of examples where version 1 was wrong,
right.
Version 2 was better,
Yeah.
version 3 was great, or, and so, that's part of the process. If you give up after version 1,
Right.
what's the point?
Well, it'd
yeah.
be like if designers had 10
So-
concepts.
Yeah.
So depending on how brief the question is and how brief the answer is, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Hi, beautiful topic. Thank you all. I have a quick but 2-part question. So you're talking about making sure that your new technologies don't distract from, say, the driver or the operator of combines or even the user of your Dell products.
Yep.
How do you evaluate what is distracting and what isn't? And then if it's new technologies and new systems, how do you educate them? You know, like Austen was saying about the symbology. If it's somebody who doesn't have any sense of how to get there, or are they just not part of your target market?
I mean, the time to complete a task, if I'm looking at it from a tech perspective, if I'm trying to do something and I'm observing, a user and it takes a long amount of time, we're always sitting there saying, why does it take that long? Like, how can you do it better, faster, more efficient? And so we obsess over getting rid of waste. So that's a never-ending mission. I was in a hospital a while ago, and we were looking at patients, the data flow through a hospital from the incident through the assessment, through the care, and the number of steps it was taking, and all the material that was being generated. And it was like digital and handwritten and digital back and forth. And it was like, we were looking at it going, God, this is ridiculous. Like, there's got to be a better way. And so, through virtualization, through some of our thin client type products, we started imagining, a better way to go do that and just cut that time down so that it is more efficient. So, there's so much opportunity in almost every sector to do it fundamentally simpler and better. I think we're going to be very healthily employed for a long time fixing, making things better.
So we're going to have to stop things here. I hope that we have inspired conversations to continue over lunch and throughout the remainder of the conference. So I want to thank again Kevin George, Ed Boyd, and Austen Angell for participating in this panel and sharing your insights. Also want to thank our sponsors, Ford again, keys please, Ford again, and our friends at Core 77.
Yeah.
You get a car.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Really nice job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Hey, thanks a lot, Erik.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So that concludes our program for this morning. We'll go to lunch soon. Please be back on time at 1:30. We have